There are 195 countries on Earth. Tomorrow morning, imagine there is one flag, one currency, one legal code, one government sitting above every human being alive, and not a single border left anywhere to die on. It sounds like peace.
It isn't.
You have probably had this thought before. Maybe you had it watching a war unfold on a screen the size of your hand. Maybe you had it watching a climate summit end with a group photograph and a promise nobody intends to keep. If we all answered to the same authority, none of this could happen, right? Hold on to that feeling. We are going to take it seriously. More seriously, in fact, than the people who laugh it off, because the idea of a single world government is not a stupid idea. It is a precise idea aimed at the wrong problem. Start with what it would actually fix. Some problems on this planet are genuinely unsolvable by countries acting alone. A fish that swims across a line on a map does not belong to anyone. Carbon released in one hemisphere warms the other. A virus does not check a passport. Economists call these externalities, and the pattern is always the same. The cost is shared by everyone. The benefit of cheating is collected by one. So a world government looks like the obvious answer. One authority, one rule, no cheating. And for a very specific class of problem, it might genuinely work better than anything we have now. But here is the question nobody asks first. Can a single government actually hold 8 billion people? Not politically, cognitively. In the 1990s, a British anthropologist named Robin Dunbar noticed something strange while studying primates. The size of a species' social group tracked the size of its neocortex. He ran the numbers for humans and got a figure that has followed him ever since, around 150. That is roughly the number of stable relationships a human brain can hold at once. Not friends, not acquaintances, people whose lives you can actually track. Every structure we have built above that number is a workaround. Laws, bureaucracies, institutions, paperwork. These are prosthetics for a brain that was never designed to care about a stranger 9,000 kilometers away. So what happens when you stretch that prosthetic across the entire species? You get a legibility problem. And in 1998, a Yale political scientist named James C. Scott wrote a book about exactly this, called Seeing Like a State. His argument was quiet and devastating. In order to govern something, a state first has to be able to see it. So it simplifies. It replaces 100 local names for a forest with one word, timber. It replaces winding village paths with a grid. It replaces what farmers know in their hands with what an official can put in a column. Scott called that local, unwritten, hands-on knowledge medis, and he showed that when a central authority overwrites it, the results are not just inefficient, they can be catastrophic. Forests planted in perfect rows that die of disease, cities designed on paper that no one wants to live in, agricultural plans that starve the people they were built to feed. Now scale that to a planet. A world government would have to make 8 billion people legible to a single administrative eye. Every local exception becomes noise. Every regional adaptation becomes an inefficiency to be corrected. Do you want your life to be a rounding error in a spreadsheet that big? There is a second problem, and this one is older than paperwork. In 1988, the archaeologist Joseph Tainter published a study of why complex societies fall apart. His answer was not invasion or decadence or moral decay. It was arithmetic. Societies solve problems by adding complexity. More administrators, more layers. More rules. At first, each new layer pays for itself enormously, but the returns diminish. Eventually, you reach a point where a society is spending more and more energy just to maintain the machinery it already has and getting almost nothing back. Tainter's conclusion is uncomfortable. Collapse in that situation is not a failure. It is a rational simplification. The society sheds complexity it can no longer afford. A single world government would be the most complex administrative structure in the history of life on Earth, and it would have no external competitor forcing it to stay efficient. No rival state offering a better deal, no comparison at all. Which brings us to the part that should actually frighten you. Every tyranny in human history has had one weakness: a border. Huguenots fled France, Jews fled Europe, dissidents fled the Soviet bloc. Nearly 200,000 people fled East Germany in a single year before a wall went up to stop them. The existence of somewhere else has been, quietly, one of the most important protections human beings have ever had. A world government abolishes somewhere else. Not on purpose, not by anyone's malice. It is simply the structure. If there is one authority, there is no elsewhere. If it makes a mistake, the mistake is global. If it becomes cruel, the cruelty is inescapable. There is no boat, no visa, no border to run for. And the philosopher Immanuel Kant saw this coming in 1795. In his essay on perpetual peace, he argued for something that sounds contradictory at first. He wanted an end to war, but he explicitly rejected a single universal state as the way to get there. A world monarchy, he warned, would eventually become a soulless despotism, and he described the outcome with a phrase that still lands: the graveyard of freedom. His alternative was a federation. Sovereign states bound by law that agreed not to fight but that remained separate. So is the answer simply nothing? No coordination at all? No, and the most important evidence for this came from someone who spent her career watching real people solve exactly this problem. Her name was Elinor Ostrom. For decades, economists taught that a shared resource, a pasture, a fishery, a watershed, would inevitably be destroyed by the people using it unless it was either privatized or seized by a central state. Ostrom went and looked. Swiss alpine meadows, Japanese village forests, Spanish irrigation systems, Turkish fishing communities. She found that people had been managing shared resources sustainably for centuries, sometimes for 800 years, without privatization and without a central authority. They did it through nested layers of rules that they wrote themselves, monitored themselves, and enforced themselves. She called the structure polycentric governance, many centers overlapping, each handling the scale it could actually see. In 2009, she became the first woman to win the Nobel Prize in economics for it. Notice what that finding is. It is not an argument for chaos. It is an argument that the right size of an institution is determined by the problem, not by ambition. A watershed is governed at the scale of a watershed. A pandemic is governed at the scale of a planet. A school is governed at the scale of a street. One government for everything would be exactly as wrong as no government for anything, and wrong in a way that is much harder to reverse. But here is the twist you were not expecting. It may be coming regardless of what you think of it. In 2003, the political scientist Alexander Went published an argument that a world state is, in his word, inevitable, not because it is good, because the logic of technology keeps forcing it. As destructive power spreads, security becomes indivisible. As economies interlock, so do laws. His estimate was somewhere between 1 and 2 centuries. Went might be wrong, but you can already see the outline. International courts, global financial rules, climate treaties with enforcement teeth. Standards written in one room that quietly govern devices in every home on Earth. Nobody voted for a world government. Pieces of one are being assembled anyway in fragments without a name and without a ballot. So the real question was never whether Earth should have one government. The real question is whether the pieces being assembled right now will look like Kant's federation, with law between separate powers, or like his graveyard, with law above a species that has nowhere left to go. That difference will not be decided by a summit. It will be decided by whether the people building those pieces understand what Dunbar found about the limits of the human mind, what Scott found about the arrogance of the administrative eye, what Tainter found about the cost of complexity, and what Ostrom found in a Swiss meadow that had been managed well for 800 years by people who never once asked permission from a capital. Tonight, somewhere on this planet, a policy is being written that will apply to you and to someone you will never meet. There are 195 countries on Earth. That is not a failure of coordination. That is 195 running experiments, 195 chances that someone somewhere is getting it right, and 194 places to go when the one you were born into gets it catastrophically wrong. Look at that number again. It is not a symptom of a divided world. It is the last insurance policy the species has left.